guys, so today's video is very exciting because it's my first attempt at a video essay. Now for anyone who was a teenager or maybe slightly older in the late 2000s, you may have been a big fan of the show Glee. I definitely was because I really love music and I love to sing, so it was a very important show for me at the time, and a very important character in the show was one Miss Rachel Berry, who a lot of people did not like as a character, which I think there are a lot of valid reasons for that, and also a lot of maybe not so valid reasons, which I'm going to go into in this video. Because I recently had the realization that a big part of her character traits and personality all fit really well with being autistic, and in her case being autistic coded, because obviously in the show they never say that she's autistic, they never imply it, they never kind of, you know, it's not something that comes up at all. But yeah, I had this realization recently, and I had a look on YouTube and it seemed like nobody else had made this video, so I was like, well, it's definitely my job to make this video now. I probably would have made it even if somebody had made it, I don't know, because I just really want to talk about this. But yeah, the character of Rachel Berry meant a lot to me as a teenager, and I really connected to her, and now that I've kind of had this realization about her, I feel like this is a really big part of why her character meant a lot to me, and why I also felt very kind of sad and like defensive, I suppose, whenever people said that she was annoying or when they criticised her. And again, I think some of those reasons were, you know, valid. Like, they definitely make Rachel and a lot of the other Glee characters do terrible things in the show that are worthy of criticism, but I do think that she got a lot more sort of hate and criticism than any of the other characters did, and I do feel like this is maybe quite a big part of why, and why she really kind of stuck out to me from the rest of the characters, and why I really connected with her. So yeah, I'm gonna kind of go into like each thing and how I feel like Rachel sort of fits that trait or sort of personality aspect, and hopefully it might make you feel a little bit more sympathetic to her than you maybe did before, and if you already loved her, then maybe you will also kind of understand why. I don't know, maybe that will also kind of be a similar journey to you as it was for me. Okay, so I'm gonna go through each character trait, and I have some cute little like cards for these. I don't have cards for all the traits, so I'm very sorry about that. But first we are going to start with special interests. Now obviously anybody will know that a big part of being autistic is having special interests, things that you become very obsessive about, you know, a lot of the time to a degree that might feel unhealthy to other people, maybe to neurotypical people, and I think Rachel Berry is a very, very good example of somebody with special interests. So her first special interest obviously is Broadway, singing, becoming famous, and yeah, I think that obviously a lot of the characters want to make something of themselves. So Mercedes wants a singing career, she wants to make music, Kurt also wants to be on Broadway, etc, etc. But Rachel, I feel like for her it's just like so much a higher level than anybody else. It's like she has this like laser focus, like she has this drive, and this thing, like, it's so much bigger than anything else, and you know, a lot of the time it kind of causes her to do things that negatively affect her relationships with other people, or you know, negatively affect herself ultimately, but she just can't really stop. Like, she kind of, yeah, it's like she's got this like myopic focus, and she's like, I need to be on Broadway, I need to be famous. And yeah, I think that the other characters do also have this kind of these goals and this drive, but she's the only one who it really feels like it's so much bigger and it's like her whole life, you know. And I think that a lot of autistic people have that degree of, you know, obsession, like it's an obsessive interest for her. Yeah, I think that's the main one for Rachel Berry. The other one I wanted to talk about, which I feel like again is maybe not, a lot of people might not see it as a special interest, but I think Rachel Berry's crushes are kind of a special interest for her. So anyone that she has feelings for, we see her develop this kind of embarrassing but short-lived fixation with the teacher Will Schuster in season 1, and you know, she sings the song Crush, and it's very yeah, I think her feelings for people don't feel, you know, a big part of Glee is that all these characters have like relationships that are constantly changing and developing feelings for each other. But I think Rachel, again, is the only character to me where her level of her feelings and her obsessive behaviors feel very exaggerated compared to other people. And one clip that really comes into my head is when she's dating Finn, and they have this very on-off relationship, but I think it's either season 1 or I think it's like early season 2, and they have this like silly clip where Finn is playing basketball you know, in the school, and Rachel's like on the sidelines, and she's wearing this t-shirt that says like Team Finn, and she's like bouncing up and down and like waving at him and being like this kind of like really over-the-top embarrassing girlfriend. Oh, and they also have a moment as well where Rachel is like, oh, I made his and hers calendars to, you know, to give to Finn. And yeah, I think that the way that she behaves around people that she has feelings for is just not something that you see any of the other characters really do. Like, they all do, like, you know, they'll do embarrassing things, or like, you know, they'll make it obvious that they have strong feelings, but she's the only one that they kind of take it one step further. And I feel like this is going to be, as we get further and further into this video, it's a running theme of Rachel that everything that she does is just very intense and very obsessive, and it's like a lot of times she has no filter, or it feels like she has no level of control over it. And I just think that her crushes, and also some of her behaviour towards Quinn as well, which anyone who ships Rachel and Quinn will appreciate me saying this, but I think that she also behaves very intensely towards Quinn, and she's like very, very like happy about being Quinn's friend. And yeah, it's just very everything's very exaggerated with her and her feelings, and as we'll get into later in the video, then whenever she's like rejected by people as well, that comes into a very intense way, but we'll get onto that one. So yeah, Rachel definitely has what you would call special interests. Broadway, her crushes. I'd be interested to see if anyone else thinks there's any other ones that I've missed, but they're kind of the only two that I really could think of. Okay, so next we have rituals and routines, which are obviously a very big part of life for autistic people generally. So Rachel has a few kind of rituals and routines that you see throughout the whole show. I'd say generally speaking, her character is generally like a control freak. Like she's very bossy, she's very demanding, she loves to be in charge, and again that kind of feeds into her, you know, obsession about Broadway and the fact that she likes to be the star and she likes to be the centre of attention. But I think a lot of it isn't to do with that, and it's just that she likes to be in control of situations. You know, she likes them to go the way that she expects them to go. And you know, she's the kind of person who will sort of, you know, always be managing things, micromanaging things, which again is a reason why a lot of people don't really like her. They think that she's too bossy or too kind of pushy. But I think a lot of the time it doesn't really come from a place of wanting to put other people down. And the same with, I kind of think, a lot of her other behaviours as well, where it's not really about wanting other people to be lesser, apart from moments where she feels threatened, which I'll get into later on, like with the rejection stuff. But generally speaking, I think a lot of her behaviours aren't really an attempt to make other people feel bad. It's kind of just what she needs to do. So yeah, we have a few. The show actually literally opens with one of Rachel's rituals, which is the fact that she always puts a gold star after her name, which just, you know, she has her own reason for it as well. She's like, my gold stars are a metaphor for me being a star. But it just feels like a very like autistic thing to do to me. She's like, you know, it's like something that she always has to do, and it doesn't really make sense to anybody apart from her. So the gold stars is definitely what I would describe as a ritualistic behaviour. She also has another few like routines throughout the show. You do see her, I think there's an episode, I can't remember which one it is, I'm sorry, where she wakes up really early in the morning and she's describing how, like, you know, she's looking at this like vision board of her becoming famous, and she's like cycling on one of those little I don't know what they call them, the little like exercise bikes, and you get the impression that, I think she even says in fact that she like does this like every morning. It's like, I get up at 6 a.m, I have my like juice or whatever, I do my exercise bike, I think about my like vision, and you know, she's very like beholden to this sort of you know, these set behaviors, these set routines. We also see another one that comes to my mind in season 4 at the start of her being at Niada, where she talks about the fact that she ends up doing her skin routine at like a really weird time of the night, because it takes her like half an hour or something to do it, and she doesn't want to get in people's way. And that's how she meets Brody, who she has the relationship with in season 4. But again, that also feels like a very like, you know, it's like, I have to do this set thing, it has to be this set length of time. To the point where, you know, she said like it's affected other people, so she has to kind of work around that, like she has to make a workaround, which yeah, feels very pointed to me. Yeah, I think there might be some other ones. Again, let me know if you think of any that I've not mentioned, but I just feel like Rachel is generally driven by sort of rituals and routines. Okay, so for the next one, I've made a really terrible homemade card just because I don't have all of them. I'm very sorry. So next we're going to talk about social justice, which I think is one that doesn't really get talked about as much. What I mean by that is one of the maybe lesser known or lesser talked about traits of autism is that a lot of autistic people have a very strong personal sense of like social justice. And I think in part this kind of ties into not really knowing or understanding or agreeing with rules, whether that's sort of social rules, or it can be more a sense of, you know, this has to be this way, but actually that doing it that way is really, you know, it's outdated, or it's you know, actively hurting people in some way, and just doesn't really make sense. And I think Rachel displays a few of these, so again, another box to tick off on the autistic traits. Firstly, she's a vegan, and they don't talk about this a ton throughout the show, but they do kind of make enough references for you to get the idea that she's a vegan for, you know, sort of social justice reasons. In the scene where Jessie breaks all the eggs over her head, she makes some kind of reference to, like, you know, she keeps being haunted by dreams of like baby chicks and stuff, so it's very much implied that she's a vegan, not for like dietary reasons, but, you know, because she believes it's the right thing to do. We also have another few moments where Rachel does things and it's very clear that she's done them because she just feels like it's the right thing to do, and sometimes this helps people, sometimes it hurts them, but either way, you know, she can't stop herself from doing that. One example is the episode where Rachel and Kurt are both vying for a solo on Wicked's Defying Gravity, and to get the solo, because they're both, you know, arguably equally good singers, it kind of really depends on who can hit this high note. And as it turns out, they can both hit the high note, but Rachel like deliberately fluffs the high note so that Kurt will get the song and get the solo, because she feels like he needs it more, he deserves it more, etc, etc. And, you know, that's quite an unusual thing for Rachel to do, because, you know, as the show establishes, she's like this massive diva, she like always wants all the solos, she always wants all the like spotlight moments and to shine, so it's quite rare for her to, you know, actively give that to somebody else. So the fact that she, like, you know, gives this to Kurt shows that she had this really strong sort of sense of social justice. There's also a couple of other moments that show this behaviour. One of them is when Rachel tells Finn that he's not the father of Quinn's child. And again, even though Rachel has feelings for Finn, like, I think the show does a lot to suggest that she doesn't tell Finn this because she wants him for herself. Like, she tells him because she feels like it's the right thing to do and she feels like he deserves to know. And, you know, she does this even though it makes her unpopular in the Glee Club and people feel like, you know, she's a bit of a narc. We also have another episode, again in season 1, in the laryngitis episode, where Rachel is really frustrated that she's the only one singing, and she feels like she's kind of single-handedly carrying the Glee Club. And again, that kind of goes against this like concept of her as just being this diva, because, you know, a lot of people think that Rachel just wants to like have all the glory, but in fact, like, she feels like everybody else should be like pulling their weight and should be, you know, equally singing in the Glee Club. So yeah, I think that Rachel is a pretty strong, what's the word? She pretty strongly adheres to, you know, these ideas of sort of social justice. Okay, so the next two I'm going to talk about feel like much bigger traits of Rachel in relation to autistic behaviour. So next, and I have a fancy card again for this one, next we're going to talk about social awkwardness, bluntness, like masking, like that whole kind of area. So, Rachel falls into this one in several ways. Firstly, her dress sense, which is one of the reasons that she kind of tends to stand out and be unpopular, even in the Glee Club itself, which, you know, is made up of, like, everybody in the Glee Club is generally unpopular most of the time, apart from Finn and Quinn, who occasionally kind of claw back their popularity by being cheerleaders and on the football team, and Santana and Brittany as well, I suppose. But generally all the Glee kids are unpopular, but Rachel is like super unpopular, and one of the reasons for this is because of the way she dresses. I think Kurt is the one who describes her dress sense as like she dresses like a baby and a grandma at the same time. I definitely modelled a lot of my fashion sense after Rachel, and also Emma Pillsbury at the time of Glee, because it was very that kind of like preppy look. I didn't love everything that Rachel wore, but I did love a lot of it. But yeah, I think that a lot of the way that she dresses feels more childlike than the way that the rest of the Glee Club dress. You know, she's got a lot of these like knee-high socks. She wears a lot of like blouses that have got ruffles on them and stuff like that. I actually quite like that Rachel, and I suppose a few of the other Glee Club, dress more like teenagers, as opposed to sort of shows nowadays, like, you know, you've got Euphoria and things like that, where everyone dresses like an adult, and it kind of makes it even harder for you to buy the fact that these, you know, it's normally adults playing these teens anyway, so it just makes it even harder for us to believe that they're meant to be teens. So I do kind of like that innocence and that sort of childlikeness that they maintained about the fact that, you know, these are just kind of like young teenagers and stuff. But yeah, so for Rachel, I think that dressing in a childlike way can be associated with autistic people and as a behaviour, partly because it's sort of a feeling of not caring what other people think, and again it sort of plays into this idea of social rules, and I think that in a lot of ways Rachel doesn't really care about social rules, and that feels like a really big example. I also think that she tends to opt for, you know, things that you could connect to autism, like she wears like brighter clothes, she kind of wears clothing that, you know, is more comfortable, which you could say is like a sensory thing, and so on. But yeah, I think by and large it's just this idea that she's sort of like marching to the beat of her own drum, which I always, like, in every sense I always really respected that and kind of really wanted to you know, also do that. So yeah, I think the dress sense is one. The other one is that Rachel is very much a person who just says what she thinks and says what she feels. She's very blunt, which again is very autistic behaviour, and I think that this is both for better and for worse, obviously, for Rachel. Like the fact that she doesn't sugarcoat her words, like, you know, a lot of the time it makes her stand out, and it makes either people, you know, they don't know how to react to it, or they don't like her. Sometimes she will just say things that aren't really like socially approved of. So, you know, one example that sticks out to me, again, season 1, is when she says girls want sex just as much as guys do in the chastity club. And, you know, you can tell that this isn't really something that's, sorry, the celibacy club, same difference. But yeah, she's saying something here that's very much going against the grain of, you know, the club itself, but also it's kind of something that wouldn't really be approved of for a girl to say, I suppose, in general. So there's that. She also tends to insult people a lot, obviously, or she'll say things that are just her opinion and are quite insulting to other people. She'll kind of comment a lot on other people's singing ability, because singing is something that's, you know, again, her special interest. So to Quinn, she says, you know, you're a really good singer, Quinn, occasionally sharp, but that's because you lack my years of training. And, you know, I think anybody who has, you know, either is neurotypical or is autistic, but they've kind of learnt their boundaries, they wouldn't say that last part. They wouldn't say, you know, you're occasionally sharp, but you lack my years of training, because that's quite, you know, it's not a very nice thing to say. You could argue it's unnecessary and so on, but Rachel just doesn't have that filter. And I think that's a really big autistic trait. So okay, I'm coming to the last one now. Again, I'm sorry I don't have a fancy card for this one, but now I'm going to talk about strong emotions slash you know, difficulty managing these emotions slash rejection sensitivity dysphoria, and this is a very big thing for autistic people, and Rachel like demonstrates this to like an absolute T. So firstly we have, I kind of talked at the start about how Rachel's strong emotions mean that she's very intense about her feelings and her crushes. I think that this has kind of calmed down a bit by season 4 when she has the relationship with Brody. But I would kind of argue that that's because, you know, she's sort of been through puberty by this point. She's got a bit of a better handle on herself, and, you know, you could also argue that she's kind of learned how to mask a lot as well. You know, she's learned what behavior isn't well received by others, and, you know, her being really intense and obsessive about her feelings, like especially for Finn, which we see like very much throughout the first few seasons of Glee, is just not very well received, usually by the romantic recipient and also by other people around them as well, you could say. But yeah, so these strong emotions very much tie into breakups. So whenever anybody breaks up with Rachel, Finn, Jesse, Puck, I guess you could say, she takes it very badly. She takes it very personally, like she really struggles to move on. I think that they really show that she struggles to get over relationships in a way that seems a lot harder for her than, like, you know, the other members of the Glee Club. She also really struggles to take criticism about her singing and about her talent and her abilities. And I think one of the maybe the strongest examples of this sort of rejection sensitivity is in relation to her obsessive special interest of singing and Broadway. We really see her struggle when anybody with talent comes into the Glee Club. So Sunshine Corazon is a really great example of this. I think this is in season 3. Season 2. I believe it's season 2. And Rachel sends her to a crack house. Not an active crack house is her defense, but she really like can't handle the idea of someone coming in and taking her spotlight, and it seems to be that it's not about the other person, it's about Rachel and how it makes her feel less than, it makes her feel rejected. And, you know, she really like spirals out of control with it in a way that feels very much like rejection sensitivity. She also really struggles when she gets rejected. She gets rejected initially from Niada. She does eventually get in. I can't remember how they work that one, but they do. But yeah, I mean, obviously this is her lifelong dream, so it's not like she's not going to take it really hard, but like it just feels like every time something goes wrong for Rachel, every time you know, every time it seems like other people are better than her. And also the episode where her and Kurt went to this other school, in, I think this was either season 1 or 2 again, and they meet these group of really talented kids. And, you know, Rachel kind of realises that eventually she's not going to be like one of the most talented people in the room anymore. She's going to be in a room full of other people who, you know, are as talented as her or more talented than her. And she really struggles to handle that. One of the more unusual examples I have of this rejection sensitivity, which I think you could argue feels a lot less obvious than the other stuff, but I think could definitely fall under this, is when Quinn quits the Glee Club in season 3, like she's really going through a hard time after, you know, she gave up her baby and she's just really feeling really lost, and she kind of goes through this punk phase, and she, like, you know, cuts all her like blonde hair and dyes it pink, and she joins this like group of like rebel kids called the Skanks. And Rachel is the only character to go and try and get her back, and it feels like Rachel has sort of interpreted Quinn like quitting Glee Club and rejecting Glee Club as Quinn rejecting her, and like she feel like she's almost taken it personally, you know, and the fact that she's the only one who goes and tries to get Quinn back, it feels like, you know, it feels like you could read into it as this sort of rejection sensitivity. So yeah, I think that's all of the behaviours I noticed for Rachel, which definitely feels to me like more than enough to say that she is a very autistic coded character. The only one that I didn't notice so much was any kind of sensory issues, but I think that that's something that you wouldn't really see kind of come up in a show like Glee anyway. So, you know, you could argue that maybe Rachel does have that and you just don't see it or something, but either way, I think there's more than enough evidence to show that, you know, Rachel has special interests, she has rituals and routines, she has like strong emotions and difficulty managing them, and the kind of rejection sensitivity that comes with that. She has a really strong sense of like social justice, and yeah, she has the social awkwardness, the bluntness, the you know, the difficulty kind of masking behaviours that other people don't like. Yeah, I'd love to know what you think. For me, I think realizing all this, I'm realizing that, you know, these are probably the biggest reasons why I latched onto her so intensely as a character, and I didn't know why, because they never said. And, you know, it would also be interesting to see how differently people would have interpreted her character if they had said she was autistic. Like, would they have been kinder to her? Would they have interpreted her behaviour more generously? Would they still find her as annoying? The only, to my knowledge, there might be more because I didn't watch all of season 5 and 6, but I believe the only character that is ever canonically autistic in Glee is a character called Sugar Motter. And you know, in keeping with Glee being terrible at the representation that they try and do, not all of the time, but a lot of the time, the way that they did it was for Sugar to say she had Asperger's, and that was the reason why she insulted people all the time, which, like, that's the only kind of reference that they really made to it, and yeah, it just doesn't really feel great. So I think because Rachel was such a central character of Glee, it just kind of feels like a shame to me that, you know, and I don't even really know if the writers realised all of this that they had done, like if they realised that, you know, Rachel's kind of finicky behaviours and her obsessions and her kind of inability to, you know, to not say what she thinks and everything else that I've just talked about, like, you know, did they realise what they had done, or was it just like a weird coincidence? Because, you know, I think there's a lot of characters that get written like this, and it probably speaks to the fact that so many people still don't really fully recognise and understand what an autistic person can be and what they can look like. So I hope if they ever do remake Glee, which feels like, you know, it's fairly likely that that's going to happen at some point, you know, over the next sort of 5 to 10 years. I hope if they do that maybe they take the chance to actually have a character and say that they're autistic, because I just think that if I had known that, if I knew all the reasons why I connected with her so much, then maybe my own kind of life journey would have been different. I don't know. And even if it hadn't been, I think that it's really valuable for people to know that, just to have more autistic characters in the media and to see what that means and what it looks like, and for there to be less of a sort of, you know, Sheldon Cooper-esque stereotype, which, you know, funnily enough, they never even said that he was explicitly autistic, even though they, you know, they literally did everything to suggest that he was. But yeah, that's everything. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I'm sure that I will be making more at some point because, yeah, I just really like to talk about the media that I love. So thank you very much for watching. And that's what you missed on Glee.